but we're going live. So,
like your music.
Thank you.
So where's your
next? I did get the message that it is live on X. I'm going to refresh here. I'm sorry, what was your question?
Oh, I was just chit-chatting. I was going to ask you, where's your next trip?
Probably Italy again. I'll tell you about that more later. But that's not with my family. With my family to Spain and Portugal, I hope, Lord willing. So I'm checking to see if we're live on YouTube. Okay. We are live on YouTube.
So if I click on the text on my home screen, it'll take me to this. So that's good.
Yeah. Looks like we've got a few people tuning in. Welcome, everybody. We are going to be starting very shortly. We're going to give a few minutes for a few other people to join. Would really appreciate it if during this, if you, or even right now would be a great time just to repost this post and encourage other people to come. The more the merrier. And drop us a comment below, say hello, and let us know if you've ever been to Venice. We would love to hear from you. While we're waiting, everybody, I'll just give you a little background about myself. I hope most of you are familiar with my channel, but if you're not, I'm a middle-aged dad. I have a passion to travel, and I've actually been blessed enough to travel to quite a few places around the globe over the last decade. And I got to tell you, Venice is one of my favorite spots. So I'm super excited about tonight. I think it's going to be a great show. And Shelly really has some great things planned for us. But hey, comment below. Let us know if you're watching. I'd love to know who's all tuned in. And if you've been to Venice before, let us know. We'll be able to speak and gear this a little bit differently, depending on if you've never been or if you know Venice pretty well. So drop us a line. All righty. All right, Shelly, how you doing?
Hi, great.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Everybody, this is my friend Shelly. She has a great channel here on X. It is called Beautiful Histories, and you can find her handle in the description here. But let me introduce her to you. She has a Bachelor in Histories and a Master's in European History. She could answer any question I gave her about Venice. She's been there more than 10 times, and she's got a lot of great things to tell us tonight. Shelly, you want to tell us a little bit about your X account and what you're doing?
Okay, yeah. So I think a good way to describe beautiful histories is just that I talk to people about noticing the details, and I'm kind of focused towards travelers and towards just people who love art, architecture, music, and I think in our busy lifestyle, we just don't allow time for that. So I encourage travelers. What Beautiful History, my business, does is encourage travelers to really immerse themselves in their destination before they even go, so that when you get there, it feels a little bit familiar. You've got the context. It's not just a fire hydrant of information coming at you all at once when you're just wanting to enjoy all the pretty things you see. So that's kind of my philosophy for travel. I like to stay longer in one place, really get to know it, know its stories, understand its art. And so that's kind of what my account is like.
I got to say, what I really liked about your account, and like you said, you want to know these things before you see them. I don't know how many times I've been to an amazing place and I get home and then I watch some special on it and I'm like, oh my goodness, I wish I would have known about this thing or about this, secret or something. I would have checked it out while I was there. And tuning into your X account, I learn stuff every day and I'm better prepared to travel. And, Venice is just an incredible place. There's so much history there. I really think this series is going to be great. Just so you people know, this is kind of a 3-part series. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the piazza. We're going to walk around and see what all the different buildings are, the symbolism, what they're about, and it's kind of the history. Shelly's got some great stories for us. You need to understand these things because if you've ever traveled through Europe, you will see 1,000 churches, and they all start to look the same, and all the squares start to look the same, but they're all different. And Venice, in particular, has some amazing, incredible history, and it's right there in front of our eyes. So Shelly's going to kind of decode it for us tonight, and we've got a few more nights planned. We'll be doing this every Monday for the next couple Mondays. So tonight, we're going through the piazza. Next week, we'll be talking about the Basilica facade. It's quite a facade if you've seen pictures. And then the third week, which I'm really looking forward to, is going into the Basilica and kind of walking through and learning what the different parts are, what the different art means. And there are some incredible stories in store for you. So stay tuned. And Shelly, before I turn it over to you, please stay tuned to the end. Shelly has a little surprise for us that she'll be treating us with for sticking around. And we'll have questions and answers at the end as well. But please, during this show, please drop us your comments in the comment section, and we'll be reading them as we go and answering them at the end. And one more time before we begin, please repost. Please give Shelly a follow and give me a follow. And say hello. Let us know that you're watching. All right, Shelly, you want to take it away for us?
Okay, yeah. So I think a good place for me to start is maybe tell you guys about my first time to go to Venice. It was a great opportunity. It was a very expensive trip. And for some reason, I don't know what was going on, I arrived in Venice and knew nothing. I knew it was very beautiful. And other than that, I really didn't know very much. So a lot of my time was spent just in this kind of state of confusion and overstimulation. It's like I see all these beautiful things and I know that they're important, but I have no idea what they are. And I didn't know how to find my way around. I didn't know how to use the Vaporetto. And so a lot of my downtime is just frantically looking for, how do I get around? And it was a kind of a sad, wasted experience. So I've learned just as I've gotten older how valuable it is to just really spend the time to get to know a little bit about your destination before you go. And another benefit that my son pointed out to me is doing this actually kind of prolongs your travel experience, because
Yep.
it's not just while you're on the ground, you're enjoying it and learning about it before you even go. So that's
Absolutely.
kind of my, kind of my lesson learned a long time ago. And
All
Venice,
right.
you going to say something?
Oh no, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to click to the next slide or we'll start here.
Yeah, you can go on to the next. It's
Okay.
So I'll tell you some reasons I like Venice so much. Well, first, I'm a historian, and Venice has a really interesting, unique story. And for one thing, I like it because it kind of existed between the Byzantine East and the Roman West. So it's not quite either, but it's a blend, but it also is totally unique. So that makes it an interesting story. It's really interesting for church history because you can see the different influences from the East and the West kind of converge and interact in Venice. I also like Venice because it's tiny and it's walkable, and you've got this enormous collection of world-class art and architecture. And the farthest stretch I think in Venice is 3 miles, and it's just all right there. And to me, I think that probably the best way to really learn about a country, a society, a civilization is through what it's left behind in its art and architecture. History books, of course, but in history accounts, we kind of know what they want us to know about themselves.
Sure.
But it's the art and the architecture that really speak, where we can actually really see what was important. And an example that I've used before is if some of you guys are old enough to remember learning about the USSR, the Soviet Socialist Republic, and they had a lot of rhetoric about how they had the system that was going to elevate humanity and give it honor and dignity because everyone was going to be on the same playing field. But if you've traveled to these former Soviet bloc countries and you see the gray, drab, concrete living quarters, those tell a very different story of how much
Absolutely.
the people were valued. So I think there's a lot there in Venice that's so unique. It's totally Venice, but also that tells some really good stories. So as we walk through this tiny little area in Venice, there's some really good stories. But before we leave this picture, David, another thing I really like about Venice is that it's hardly changed. You go there and you still very much feel like you're in a medieval or a Renaissance setting. And if we look at this painting from the 1700s, if you've been to Venice, it still looks like this, except for the way that people are dressed. Nothing really changes. And thank goodness, I love the Brits and the Venetians for this, that they cling to tradition and they keep things the same. They don't, Venice has not been cursed with urban renewal projects because of their safe position in the lagoon. They've not had really a lot of damage from conquest. So it's just very authentically old.
It's a time capsule, isn't it? It's like when you get on the island, it's like you're in a time capsule. And I love it because, like you said, it's so small, but it's like a little rat maze. There are so many little alleyways and everything. And just to walk it and not even look at your phone, just walk it and get lost. And it's like you step back in time 500 years. It's a fantastic experience.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, if getting lost frustrates you, don't go to Venice, because that's part of the experience is you're going to get lost. And but sometimes those are the fun little discoveries that make memories.
Yep.
But we won't get lost in St. Mark's Square because it's nice and wide.
Right. So this is St. Mark's Square, and these are the places we'll be looking at tonight, kind of the main places. We got the Molo up front here, down by the water, the Doge's Palace in yellow, the Basilica in blue, the Patriarchal Palace in white, the library in green, and I'm going to say it wrong, but I'm going to try it, Procuratie Nuove in Vecchie. How'd I do?
Good.
And the Campanile in red, and the tower in orange. So do you want to say anything before we move on, or do you want to start with the Molo?
Yeah, we'll start with the Molo. This is such a fascinating place because there's so many, famous things all crammed in this small space that originally were just fields in front of the Doge's Palace and the Basilica. They were just fields, and they were finally paved in 1266. But for over 1,000 years, this has been the gathering place for Venetians and for people all over the world. So it's a pretty special place. And Molo, it just basically means wharf. So it was just a landing place for boats. And because Venice, for most of its history, you got around mostly on the water. It didn't have nearly as many walkable areas as it does today. So if you were going to come to St. Mark's Square, that's how almost everybody arrived, was on the Molo.
Right. I love to think of this. Somebody described it to me as this is the doorstep of Venice. So coming, today we all come in back behind St. Mark's generally, walking around, and we kind of come in the back door. But think of people for the last, 1,000, 1,500 years. This was the front door of Venice.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. So this is looking west, looking toward the Grand Canal. So you can see La Salute there, kind of in the lower left-hand part of it. Again, the boats look different in the people, but everything else looks pretty much the same. So we're going to start on the Molo, and here's a look going the other direction. Now we're looking eastward, but we're in the same spot. And we can see the two columns of justice. We can see, if you can see the markings on the pavement right down the center, that's kind of a good reminder to me to tell you there used to be a canal that came all the way up through the Piazzetta and would take you almost to the doorway of St. Mark's Basilica. But yeah,
I do have there's a slide on that later. We'll see. Yep.
And the two columns.
There it is. Yep.
Okay. So David's got it marked where you can kind of see where that canal went. But
this is a drawing, I believe, from I think it says like 1000 AD or something. You can see where the canal went right up to the basilica there.
Yeah, and clearly, the famous library is not there yet. It looks very different, but yeah, we can see that the canal just ran right up to the church, and we'll see where it hit the church here in a minute. But the two, he's got marked the two famous columns. Those are called the columns of justice, and they were brought to Venice in from Byzantium in 1172, and there were originally three. And as they were unloading, one toppled into the bacino, the big open water in front of the Molo, and is still there. And
wow, I did not know that. That's incredible.
The Venetians
these have been there for 1,000 years. These have been here for 1,000 years.
They have.
Think of that, folks. That is incredible. It is.
Well, now I'll tell you about that third one that fell in the water. The Venetians have a legend that during really bad storms, let me back up. I'm a terrible storyteller sometimes. The third column that dropped in the water had a crocodile on top. These are ancient columns. These were old columns before they came to Venice in 1172. But this one that they lost had a crocodile. And the Venetians say when there's a big storm and the waves are surging, sometime that crocodile will appear in the waves. And when that happens, when the beast appears, a young girl will vanish from the city that night. So,
ooh,
Yeah,
Wow, that's ominous and foreboding. Wow,
that's a bad sign. Yeah.
definitely for sure. All right, you
So
want to tell
that
us about this column here?
this is the column on the west, closest to the library, and this is Saint Theodore. And St. Theodore is a good reminder to me to talk about the Venetians. And I love Venice because it's also very quirky. And the Venetians were adapters. So they took things and made it suit them. So poor Theodore here is made up of lots of pieces that came over um, after the Fourth Crusade. You know, some of the things they brought were just pieces in boxes, but Theodore has a Greek head and a Roman torso. I have no idea whose legs he has, and his dragon is from the 1500s. It's from I think it's from Lombardy. So he's a hodgepodge, and that's a very Venetian thing. Is, hey, we're going to take things and make them suit our purposes. Uh, but
And
Theodore is
can you tell us why did we have a statue of Theodore in the first place? Who is Theodore, and why do we have him? Just a quick recap on that.
okay. He was the first patron saint of Venice, and he's a Byzantine saint. And in Venice's early days, it looked toward the east. Constantinople was its parent, because when Venice is founded, it's at the tail end of the Roman Empire in the west. So the Roman Empire continues in the east in Constantinople. So that was their earlier orientation. And so they kept Theodore. He is still a patron saint, but not the patron saint. And if you want to see Theodore in person and see all his bits and pieces, he's actually in the courtyard of the Doge's palace. So if you take the tour, make sure you just peek in that there's just a little kind of enclave, and there's Theodore with his
relics. His relics are there.
No, the original statue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I misunderstood you. Okay. Do they have his relics in Venice? Do you know?
I don't know. I've never heard that they do.
Okay. This is the other statue.
This is the Lion of St. Mark, and the Lion of St. Mark is the emblem of Venice. It's like our American flag, and he's everywhere, and he stands for St. Mark the Apostle, and the apostles each have a symbol dedicated to them that's taken from the book of Revelation and Ezekiel in the Bible. And so Matthew is a man or an angel. Mark is a lion. Luke is an ox, and John is an eagle. So again, we see here the Venetians adapting for their purposes, because their lion is actually an ancient Chinese sculpture. It's an ancient chimera from China, and the Venetians gave him some wings and gave him a book. The Lion of St. Mark will always have his book, and we can't see it from below. That's why we've included this old photo that's kind of head on. You can see he does, in fact, have his book. We just can't see it from below.
That's fantastic. And that book is symbolizing that he is the gospel writer, correct?
Kind of. So when you see the book, you can usually see the words, and it'll always have these words in Latin, and it says, Pax tibi Marque Evangelista Meus, which just means peace to you, Mark, my evangelist. And it's the myth behind Saint Mark becoming the patron saint of Venice, and it's the justification for the theft of the body of Saint Mark.
I love it. Yep.
And so it's kind of a backdated legend that came after they stole the body, but the legend, I think, is Mark got shipwrecked and landed on the islands of Venice, where the Doge's palace would one day be, and had a dream. And the angel came to him and said this, Pax tibi Marque, peace to you. This is where your body will one day rest. So that's the story that kind of justifies their later theft of the body of St. Mark from Alexandria. And that's what you'll always see his book say.
Right. And we will hear all about the theft of St. Mark later on in the series, right? When we get to the Basilica, you're
Yeah,
going to tell
it's
us
a
about
fun
that?
story. Yeah,
It
good story.
is. All right. Great. So stay tuned.
So yeah, so if we turn around and look back, we can see, there's the line of St. Mark on his column, and there's Theodore on his column. Interestingly, they don't look inward. They don't look outward toward the sea. They look more inward toward the Venetian people, toward Venice. And here, just in this tiny little piazzetta, this is running south from the Basilica. So St. Mark's Square is kind of like an L shape, and this smaller one is called Piazzetta, which is just a small piazza. And so we have the Doge's Palace on the left and the Library of San Savino, the Marciano Library, on the right. So two incredibly famous pieces of architecture facing each other.
You're just kind of looking from the other angle. You can see the library there and the bell tower.
Bell tower in the background. It's just a really beautiful place. If you want to see it like this without people, go early morning or late at night.
Absolutely.
And there's one more look at the columns. I will say that to the Venetians, it's unlucky to walk between the columns, because that's where they would execute criminals, and they would hang their bodies between those two columns. So it's considered bad luck. And yeah, still is. Visitors sometimes complained about that. They thought it was not nice to have them right there. But there was another story. Venetians love stories about themselves. And there's a story about a Doge, Marino Faliero, who was in a hurry. He was about to be inaugurated as Doge, and jumping out of his boat, he forgets and he dashes right between the two columns. And 7 months later, he ends up being beheaded because of a conspiracy that he has hatched to try to take over the government. So he learned his lesson to.
Wow.
That he should not have done that.
One thing you mentioned that they would string up executed people between these columns, and I cannot forget that this is the front door to Venice. So you think about the statement that this is making. I know you're going to talk a little bit later about their defenses and things like that, but this isn't a fortified place, and when you come here, they're kind of flexing their power to their visitors. Like you've got these powerful buildings and things here, and you can talk more about that. And also, here's the people we executed. So behave and respect us. Sounds like that's the message.
Yeah. Good deterrent. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Were you going to tell us about these lampposts here, I think?
Well, yes. Thank you, David. So Venice was actually the first city in the world to have gas lights that people didn't go around lighting with a pole. Actually, I think they were the first place to have street lights, period. London was the second city, and then Venetian glass being kind of their trademark. Venetian street lights are really pretty with that pink glass. So,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is pretty. Okay. Well,
all right. You want to tell us about the library here?
Yeah. So you've got the library is the long, skinny one in green, and next to that is the Zecca, or the Mint. It was the Venetian Mint. We're not going to really talk about that, but those are both San Savino creations, I believe.
Okay.
And so this gorgeous building is by Jacopo Sansovino, who was a Roman architect who came to Venice and was engaged to build this library. And the reason was, in the late 1400s, a very important Cardinal Bessarion. He was a Greek scholar. He was really a big influence in the Renaissance. He bequeathed his entire library of ancient manuscripts to the Venetian Republic. And at this time, there was almost nothing more valuable than an ancient manuscript, except maybe a relic of a saint. So Venice needed someplace to house this remarkable collection. So that's why this gorgeous library was built, and it needed to blend in with its surroundings. So if you'll jump back one slide real quick.
Yep.
So it doesn't look like the Doge's Palace, but it works with it. It's got the open arched loggia on both levels, like the Doge's Palace. And the Doge's Palace has these little crenellated figures at the top. And so this one, they did it with statues. And again, if you're a Renaissance purist, you'll notice that Sansovino has not followed all the rules strictly, but he's in Venice, where you make things work for Venice. You don't follow, you're not theory bound here. So he just really made a gorgeous structure that fits perfectly in its setting. So
it's beautiful inside and out, isn't it? This is a picture inside the library.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. So yeah, so when it was almost completed, the whole roof collapsed. And that was not good, because if you were an architect back then, you were in trouble. So Sansovino was actually thrown into prison. And luckily, he had some powerful friends in Venice who were able to get him out. But he had to thoroughly cover the cost of the rebuild out of his own pocket.
Wow.
So, yeah, you had to really
you had to stand behind your work for sure, right?
take some risks to be an architect. Yeah. But this is the main, one of the main reading room. And when it was completed, as Venice often did, they had a contest, and they invited the very best Renaissance artists in the city to compete to be able to decorate the library. So we had big names competing, and Paolo Veronese won the competition. So the ceiling is just spectacular with his paintings. There's another original Titian in the library. So it's pretty gorgeous.
It's beautiful. You know, I did not make it into this library when I was there, so I'll have to next time. So it's a reason to go back for sure.
Yeah.
All right, shall we move on to the Doge's Palace? And do you want to start off by telling us what is a Doge? I thought that was a little coin with a little dog on it. Everybody's talking about now.
So when the Venetians first kind of came together back in the 5th century, they were very early adapters of kind of a representative style government, which in the Middle Ages was, it was unheard of. They had a tribunal, and then eventually, as they grew more powerful, they were granted the permission from Constantinople to have their own duke or dukes, D-U-X in Latin. And so the Venetian corruption of that is Doge. So okay. It just means leader. That was their leader.
Okay, great. I'm going to click ahead here.
So, yeah, the Doge's Palace is gorgeous, and it's unique. There's nothing else in the world that really looks like it. It's the perfect example of Venetian Gothic. But again, it's kind of a hodgepodge. You've got on the lower level, if you put your hand over it and cut off the top, it looks very Gothic. It's got the pointed arches at the bottom. It's got the quatrefoils. It looks very, very Gothic. And then up top, it has much more of a Middle Eastern or Byzantine feel to it. And but somehow it works. The little crenellations at the top kind of mimic or balance the arches at the bottom to keep it from just looking like a big cube stuck on spindly legs.
Yeah, it is beautiful, and I love the brickwork, the orange or pink yeah. or whatever color you would call it. Can I ask you about how old is this facade? Do you know?
The facade that faces the bacino that faces the water is from the 1300s. And then the side we're looking at that faces inward to the piazza is from the 1400s.
Okay. Wow. So still super ancient.
Oh, very old. Yeah. Yeah. That's Yeah, it's so much fun. All this old stuff that still looks exactly the same. And the facade is pink Verona marble and white Istrian stone. And it's fascinating because depending on the lighting, it can look yellow and white, or it can look coral and white, or it can look pink and white. It seems to change colors.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And then there's two random pink columns that, according to some sources, these were the columns where legal sentences were read out. Usually death sentences would be read out from between those two columns. That I know, I'm not totally sure that that's true, but that's the story about those.
So if you heard your name being read between the two pink columns, you knew you were going to be hanging between the two columns out on the Molo, right?
It probably wouldn't be good. Yeah.
That's not good. Okay. So this next spot is this little corner kind of at the Doge's Palace and St. Mark's Basilica.
Mm-hmm. So this is the Porta della Carta. It's just a really beautiful Renaissance carved entryway from the 1400s. And it's Porta della Carta just means the door of the papers. And one reason was because the people who executed and who oversaw and who approved every single state document went through those doors and worked behind those doors. And also sometimes important proclamations would be brought out and announced from those doors. So
Okay.
It's called that. And above it is a beautiful and unusual depiction of the Doge. I think this is Francesco Foscari. And again, with the Lion of St. Mark. And the Venetians, because they knew what trouble a strong man could be, because remember in the Middle Ages and a lot of the Renaissance, everything else in Italy, there are these city-states that are constantly in conflict and battles, and one ruling family, kicking out another, and it's just constant turmoil. And Venice wants none of that. So they're very strict even about representations of the Doge in public spaces. So it's very rare to see this. And when you do see a representation of a Doge like this, he's always kneeling in subservience to the state. So he's still recognizing his place here.
And you can recognize them by their hats, correct? They got kind of the point at the back.
Yeah, it's called a corno. Uh-huh.
Okay, awesome.
And this is just for contrast. Venice, it was called La Serenissima because of its just legendary serenity and stability. It didn't really have coups and uprisings. It was because of its location in the lagoon with these crazy little canals that only the Venetians knew how to navigate. It just was very safe in its little lagoon, and it was safe from its own people. So if you contrast it with the Palace of Government, say in Florence, Italy, you can see on the right how defensive that looks. It's got small windows, it's got a tower, it looks very fortified to keep its enemies out and also to keep its own people out should the need arise. So if you look at Venice's, it looks positively delicate, and it's almost like they're flaunting their stability. We're just wide open because we're safe.
And correct me if I'm wrong, part of the reason they were safe, I mean, okay, so number one, they're an island, but if you had a big enough army, you could come surround the island and maybe attack them that way. But they were politically very important. They were a financial hub, and I think everybody kind of knew that and respected and knew if you pick on Venice, you're kind of going to get the wrath of the empire, and people kind of just kept off of them for that reason. Is that correct?
In some regards, I mean, they were quite powerful. Their heyday was probably the 1100s through maybe the early 1400s. Okay. They're kind of on the ascendancy until probably 1300s, and then they kind of level off, and then they begin their decline. But yeah, they had, for a while they were a superpower. They were one of the wealthiest, most powerful nations in Europe, and so tiny they didn't even show up on a map. But yeah, they had a very powerful navy. But yeah, people, Pepin, what was, Charlemagne's son, I think, was the last one who really got close enough to be a real threat. And again, he got mired up in the lagoons, and it was a mess, and didn't work.
Good for us. We got this preserved city to explore.
Yeah. So here's looking from inside the piazza, St. Mark's Square, looking at the beautiful bell tower and the beautiful church of St. Mark. And the bell tower, it's got some interesting stories. It's been there forever. It fell down once, which I'll tell you about in just a second. But I had mentioned that Venice was kind of between the Eastern Byzantine Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic West. And it was influenced by both, but didn't really consider itself subservient to either. And so in Venice, by this time, by the Renaissance, it's much more Western leaning, much more Roman Catholic, but it's still very independent. And the priests in Venice, they answered to Venice. And so Venice had much higher standards, much stricter standards for its priests. And sometimes if a priest was just caught with really egregious moral violations or corruption, he would be put in a cage and hung from the top of the bell tower and fed only bread and water, supposedly, apparently from what I've read, sometimes almost up to a year. So they had some good deterrents to keep their priests in line. But and they got in trouble with they got in trouble with the Catholic Church sometime, because the church would say, no, the clergy, they don't have to follow have the consequences of the law like everyone else. The church will deal with it. And Venice said, nope, if they're here, we're dealing with them.
Wow. Well, I got to say, being imprisoned up in the bell tower has to be better than in the prison next to the Doge's palace, because I've been in both, and the view from the bell tower is beautiful. And I actually have a video on my channel. If you search for it, you will find it, where we start at the bottom, we go up the elevator up to the top, and then we kind of look all the way around. So check that out after the show. But real quick, before we move on the Campanile, go ahead and, guys, let us know in the comments below if you've been to Venice before. Let us know who you're here. Right now, Shelly and I cannot see who all is tuned in. So we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know who's enjoying this show. And please repost it and invite others to join us, because we got a lot of good stuff coming up here. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, Shelly.
So yeah, it's a gorgeous, it's a gorgeous bell tower. It's got this beautiful gilded angel at the top. It's the angel Gabriel, which you see.
I'm going to skip
everywhere.
ahead. There you go.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You see Gabriel everywhere in Venice, because Venice, the tradition is it was founded on the Feast of the Annunciation. So Gabriel is the favorite angel in Venice. And this angel is really big, and he's gilded, and he almost served as like a beacon to ships coming back to port. And some people say that you can see it when it reflects from almost 25 miles away.
Wow.
So it's just really beautiful. And if you want to get a sense of the size, if you go across the lagoon to San Giorgio Maggiore, they also have an angel on top of their bell tower. And it's almost like the two angels communicate with each other. They face each other. But the original angel from that bell tower, they actually have in the church in a little hallway. And so you can go see how big the angel is, because They're both about the same size. But this is the bell tower where Galileo demonstrated his first telescope to the Doge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's just really an iconic landmark. I think there's a copy of it. Is it Chicago or is it Denver?
Oh, okay.
There's someplace they've built almost an exact replica. But yes,
But unfortunately, this is a rebuild, correct? Because the picture on the right looks like we lost the original.
Yeah. So the original was built in 902, and it collapsed 1,000 years later in 1902. And it fell. Luckily, it just kind of imploded and fell straight down. The Venetians say it fell like a gentleman, and luckily it did very little damage on the surrounding buildings. Nobody was injured. A cat was killed, unfortunately, but yeah,
9 lives were up.
Huh?
I said it's 9 lives were up.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, it fell in a heap, and there's actually pictures. You can see how big that heap was. It was enormous. But the angel landed intact on the steps of St. Mark, on the porch of St. Mark's Basilica, and it broke a wing, but they've repaired the wing. So they thought that was a miracle.
That is incredible.
It was rebuilt. And the Venetians, like I said, being traditionalists, they rebuilt it exactly like it was, no changes. And so it looks like it did before. And an interesting thing is when they were reconstructing it, the pilings that supported the original structure from 1,000 years ago were still intact and still in good shape. So
wow. And that's a whole nother story maybe we can get into later, is how the city is built, because it is incredible how they built this city and that it's still standing. But that's a whole nother subject, but that is incredible.
So this is Sansovino's famous loggia at the base of the Campanile. So if you go to right up the elevator or climb the stairs, this is where you would enter. It used to be a place for dignitaries, kind of a holding place, because you wanted to always keep the foreign dignitaries kind of under check. But it's just got gorgeous carvings. Well, of course, this was broken into many pieces when the bell tower fell. But because it's so beautiful and because Venetians like things to stay the same, they just put it back together. So when you're there, you can actually see the cracks where it's been pieced back together.
Wow. I noticed that when I was going in, and I didn't even connect that this was the original. I thought it was, built in 1902 or whatever, and that tourists were knuckleheads and, broke something off or whatever. But that's pretty cool. That's the original work there. Wow.
So if we keep going around the corner, we're going to go into this trapezoidal shaped square, which is St. Mark's Square, probably one of the most famous squares in the world. And it's bordered on either side by these two strings of buildings called the Procuratiere Nuove and the Procuratiere Vecchie. I'm not saying it with the proper Italian pronunciation, but
sounded good to me.
These are really pretty. They blend in perfectly to their surroundings. And these were built for the procurators of Venice, and they were very, very powerful government positions, and they were in charge of the maintenance and the treasury of the basilica, of any kind of trusts in the city, and so very powerful. And these were their offices and their housing. And the one on the right is the older of the two. It was built in the 1100s, I think, burned and was rebuilt exactly like it was in the 1500s.
The little Italian that I know, Nuove is new and Vecchie is old. So
yes, thank you for that reminder. And then at the back go back one slide.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Is Napoleon's palace that runs back across the back of the square. And he built it in 1807. He felt like he needed a palace in Venice. Unfortunately, he was deposed before it was finished, but at least he had a good architect because it does blend in very nice with the rest of the architecture. And it's now the Correr Museum, which is the Museum of Venetian History, a great museum. And that's how you would get to see the inside of the library, would be go to that museum.
So I don't want to spend too much time on Napoleon because we are coming. We're going to try to wrap up the presentation by 8 and then have questions from 8 to 8:15. But Napoleon, he came through here and he took home some treasures, didn't he? He took home the lion from the Capitol the column that we saw earlier, and some things that we'll see in St. Mark's Basilica as well. Is that correct?
He did, yeah. He made off with the lion, and then when the Austrians took over and occupied Venice, they made him send it back, and unfortunately, it got broken in a lot of pieces when it came back. So poor lion had to be pieced back together.
At least we got it back.
Yeah. Right. So the piazza is just a really nice place. It's been a gathering spot in Venice for over 1,000 years, just people from all over. And now in the evenings, the orchestras of the coffee shops set up, and there's beautiful music, and it's just a lovely place to have a Prosecco or a cappuccino or gelato.
Spritz, yeah.
Yeah, and under the stars. It's going to be the most expensive, probably, cappuccino or gelato you've ever had. But
it's worth it.
It's it's for a lot of people, it's a once in a lifetime experience. And you have to, if you think of it as I'm paying for a concert and I'm paying for this view, it's not so bad. Yep. But
I have to say, I did this for free, folks. When I was in Venice in May, everybody was tired. They wanted to go to bed. I had not had my fill. I walked out at nighttime. I made my way to St. Mark's Square, and I just walked around the place at night. All the tourists from the cruise ships and everything were gone. And, there was just a handful of people out there, and it was magnificent. I got to walk around it under the moonlight, walk along the water, and just wander about. I've got videos on my account showing the walk around the wander at night, so check that out. But you gotta visit St. Mark's at night. It's fantastic.
That's when you took the video of the snail staircase.
Yes. You got to check that out. That is a fantastic gem in and of itself. We could do a whole show just on that, I think.
So this is a great picture. I don't know if this is yours or mine, but just another view of the beautiful square and Sansovino's beautiful pavement and the basilica. So, I think we're going to go to Florian's now.
Yes.
So you've got it marked to show us where it is. And Florian's,
that's it on the right-hand side. There.
Yeah, it's like a really famous coffee shop, maybe one of the most famous coffee shops in the world. And it's been operating in business since 1720, believe it or not. So before George Washington was president, this was serving coffee.
Wow.
And the Venetians were some of the first Europeans to really get into coffee drinking, probably because of their trade ties with the East, where they did drink coffee. But it's just a beautiful place inside and out. I usually get, if it's hot, I get gelato. They have nice coffee drinks. They have really good hot chocolate. If you like really dark chocolate, it's very good. So. Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll go on. Oh, and there's two other really old coffee shops too. There's Quadri and Lavina. Florian is the most important and the most popular with Venetians because it was the one that stayed true to Venice when the Austrians occupied. The other two coffee shops would serve the Austrians, but not Florian. And but yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, they even were when the Venetians rose up against the Austrians. Florian was a hospital for the wounded, and
oh wow,
yeah. So
very cool.
Looks like we're going to the clock tower.
Yeah, it's kind of tucked in there, back in the very north end. Correct, that little small spot there. You can almost miss it.
So this is Mauro Caduce's famous clock tower. It's just really pretty. Um, some people say it's the world's first digital clock. There's another place, I think maybe in Poland, that also claims that. But you can kind of see on the left, in the area under the lion, there's a number on either side. Now we've got
Nope. Okay.
people coming out of it, but it's just very pretty. But you can go on and we can see, I think, a little better. So if you look at the picture on the right, there's a statue of the Virgin and Child, and on either side there's the digital time, so we can see it's 9 o'clock. And so still looking at this picture.
So when you say this is digital, are these digital screens, or is just digitally time is kept digitally, and then like a panel is?
Sorry, it's showing the time in digits. It's not like it's not like a machine. It's
gotcha.
they flip, but
yeah. We're in a digital world, and I've moved on to the electric realm. But thank you for clarifying that for me.
Yeah, I was not clear. But the clock is a zodiac clock, so you can see the position. It'll track the position of the stars. The actual hand on the clock is the sun. And you can see that this clock, from the 1400s, this is before Copernicus and those guys said, well, really, things don't revolve around the earth. So we can see that here we've got the earth at the center with the sun revolving around it.
Everybody flocks to Prague because of their astronomical clock, and it is a great clock. I've been there, and I've got video showing it chiming. But you can come to Venice and see one from the same time frame, and look how beautiful this is. So one more reason to head to Venice.
It's really pretty. And we may have a better picture, but twice a year, on Ascension Day and at Epiphany, those little doors that had the Roman numerals on them open up, and there's a procession of the three magi, and they come out and they bow and they tip their crowns, and they go back in, and Gabriel the angel leads them, and so it's just a really exciting thing for people to be able to be there and see that, because it's only twice a year.
That is awesome. When during the year does this happen?
Epiphany, which is January, and Ascension Day.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure when that is. And at the very top are these two guys. They're called the Moors because of the patina of the brass, and they're kind of naked except for these little kind of loincloths. But on the hour, they each strike the bell. And interestingly, they do it 2 minutes before the hour and 2 minutes after the hour. So one of them does, the old one does, I think, 2 minutes before, representing the past, and the younger one does 2 minutes after the hour, representing the future. But
nobody strikes on the hour. That's funny. I've got a picture here.
I know. I love that picture.
Yeah, this was I took this picture from on top of the Campanile, looking down. So I love this. It's a background on my computer at work.
I can't believe you got that. And wouldn't you love to live in the place with that little terrace, right?
Oh, wow. It's so beautiful. Look at the flowers and everything. Yeah. Gorgeous.
Yeah. And you can actually take, now they have tours of the clock tower. You can actually go inside and see the three magi up close and see the workings of the clock tower. And they actually had a guy still lived in the clock tower until 1998. So it's
very cool. All right, we've got a couple minutes left here. We're at the Patriarchal Palace now.
Okay,
this is
we're
the
almost
northeast
done.
corner.
This is probably part of the St. Mark's Square area that people don't pay much attention to, but it's pretty interesting. And it's on on the north side of the basilica. It's called the Piazza de Leoncione, the little square of the little lions. And so these two little lions have been here since the 1700s. You'll almost always see children sitting on them, but they're just these cute little marble lions. And then if you look back towards the back of and go back, you can see those things that look like tables at the right. That's what they put up for Aqua Alta. They're these platforms that people walk on when the water's high.
Oh, okay. I got you. Now, this area right here is one of these things that I walked right by this when I was in Venice. I didn't know a thing about it. And it wasn't until I talked to you, Shelley, that I knew to look for this. So, here you go. You guys are better informed than me. And when I go back, I'll check them out.
So I'll tell you something funny. I think that's funny about this little piazzetta is, in an aerial view, it looks a whole lot like an Apple iPhone. So you can kind of see like where the cistern is and where the steps are. It looks like where you charge it.
Oh, that's funny.
The building at the back is the Patriarchal Palace. And actually 3 20th century popes have been Venetian popes, and they started out as Venetian patriarchs. So I think John the 23rd, I forget, I've got it somewhere. But we've had 3 popes actually live in this little square, which is not when they were popes, but before they were made pope.
That is very cool.
It's a really pretty building too.
Yeah, it's easy to walk right by because they got all these shops right here on the left side of the screen. Mm-hmm. You can see all these fantastic shops and alleyways to cut back to your hotel. So easy to miss.
And yeah, it's a beautiful facade of the basilica too. Okay, so let's leave. We'll leave the St. Mark's Square. We'll leave the Piazzetta, and we'll turn the corner. And this is, in my opinion, one of the only good things Napoleon did in Venice. It's these royal gardens. And if you leave St. Mark's Square and you're heading back west, you almost don't see them. They're kind of like this little hidden treasure that a lot of tourists just walk right by and don't know is there because it's a little concealed. But if you go in there, it's just this nice, pretty little area of gardens. There's some little arbors in the back, and it's a nice place to get away. It's sometimes maintained better than other times, but it's still always a nice little respite from the crowds. So don't forget to pop in. And
I think I told you when I went on my night hike, I walked through the square, I walked down to the water, and then I walked along the Molo, and I just kept going, and I walked right by it and didn't even recognize that this was there. So
it's a little concealed.
Yeah, it's definitely another thing to check out next time I go.
Yeah. So that's our little tour. I just think there's just something about knowing the stories of a place, And if we go, we're not going to remember every single thing we talked about, but some of these memories will be triggered, and at least we'll have a little bit of context.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, folks, please, I know some of you guys got some questions or comments. Let's drop them in the comments below so Shelley can field them. But I do want to say, tune in next week, Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be talking about this building right here, the Basilica, and we'll be talking about the facade. It is quite a unique building. There's a lot of stories here. There's a lot to learn. All kinds of stuff that if you went to Venice and you hadn't listened to Shelley, you would not know. You would walk right by it, and it would just be another church to you. So tune in next week, and then the following week, we're going to go inside the Basilica. We're going to find out what each little area is meant for and the incredible story of St. Mark coming to the Basilica. And there's a little bit of scandal there, so we'll tell you about that later. But Shelley, you want to give us a little bit of you had a little surprise for us for the end of the show for sticking around. You want to share some tips with us?
Yeah, just a few travel tips. Nothing too exciting, but I think if you visit St. Mark's Square, when, during the, not like David, like after it's vacated, but if you are there, if someone comes up with a rose, a free flower for the pretty lady, don't take it, because it's
Right.
not really free, and they will follow you and not leave you alone. So it's better just to walk by. Now they're not going to hurt you. They're just going to pester you. So no
They're
free
going to pester you
flowers.
to death for sure.
Also in Venice, and I think Florence is doing this too now. You'll see people asking you to sign anti-drug abuse petitions. And if you think about it, really, who is not against drug abuse? But the petition itself is not the problem, but then they will promptly ask you for a donation, and they will get sometimes a little aggressive about that. And they are usually outside a church or even inside a church, and they're not authorized to be there. So that's another when you want to just kind of politely keep going. I will say, I'm trying to think of things people ask me. I would say avoid St. Mark's Square until late afternoon. 4 o'clock on, it'll start thinning out. You've got all the day trippers there during the day. And the best time to tour the Basilica and the Doge's Palace are also late afternoon. Definitely buy the skip the line tickets online.
For sure. Yep. That's what we did. We actually went, I think, the very first tour in the morning. I think it was at 9 o'clock. And, but it definitely filled up later in the day. So it's a good place to avoid kind of the middle of the day for sure.
Right. Yeah. And late in the day in St. Mark's, because the sun is setting in the west, you can get sometimes better lighting in there. And I would say if you're going to do the Basilica and the Doge's Palace, if you have the luxury of time, do them in 2 separate evenings, because it's a lot of information to get all at once, and it's a lot of standing for some people. And I would also say for the Doge's Palace, for the Basilica especially, if you can afford it, do the after hours tour, because then you go in the evening, it's not crowded, and they actually turn the lights on, which is how it would have originally looked with the candlelight, or pretty close. So you can actually see the marble,
Wow.
mosaics glistening. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's really pretty.
Awesome. And we're going to see lots of pictures of that a couple weeks from now.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. And folks, I'm not seeing any questions. Maybe Shelly just knocked it out of the park and answered all your questions. But if you have any, leave them now and we will check them out. I do want to say I'm really looking forward to next week, the facade of the palace. I was just awestruck when I saw it. Listen, folks, if you're going to Venice, I will say this. It's easy to get on your phone and say, okay, I'm going to St. Mark's Square. And you kind of follow it, and it'll take you from behind the basilica into the square. And it's just not as impressive as a view. What you want to do is you want to make your way out to the Grand Canal, to the main waterway, and then walk up to the piazza, to the 2 columns like Shelly showed us, and look at it that way. That's the way it's been meant to be viewed, through the front door, and it will just knock your socks off. There's something else I was going to say about that. I don't know. It'll come to me, but thank you very much, Shelly. This has been awesome. Okay. I'm going to shout out here to Hunter Lott. He's been good. He's given us a couple things. He hasn't been, it's on his bucket list, and he's asking, was the Doge's Palace, let's see here, was the Doge's Palace an afterthought? From the aerial view, it looks like it doesn't really fit with the basilica. Great question, Hunter. Thank you.
Well, no, it wasn't, nothing. He's probably seen, nothing is really true. Nothing's on the square, like if you've ever remodeled an old house, it's frustrating because there's no right angles.
Right.
And that's kind of how Venice is, but they just situate things how they want it to. And the Doge's Palace, if you've ever toured it, it actually, can you see to the right, there's a little canal that runs right behind it.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And then there used to be a canal on the left side too. So it's been hemmed in by canal. So that's maybe why it's at that funny angle. like it is.
And one thing to add to that, the canal, you can see the Doge's Palace on the screen. The canal to the right is where you will see a million famous pictures on X of the Bridge of Sighs. And we will talk about that maybe in a future episode. But basically, it's connecting the Doge's Palace to the prison. And it was the last glimpse of the free world that people would ever have as they're going to their doom in the prison. So, great question, Hunter. Anybody else have any questions? All right. Okay. He's asking, does he, Hunter, another great question. Do I need rain boots when visiting? How often does Aqua Alta happen? That's a great question. When I went, I didn't even think about it, but I see all these pictures of the water rising up to the knees and stuff. Shelley, when do we need to worry about this?
It's usually in the late fall, to early winter. So usually springtime, summer, that's not going to happen. Oh, I would strongly urge anybody, don't go to Venice in the summer. It's not, I don't think you will enjoy it as much. But I do usually take waterproof shoes, because there are sometimes you'll get, like last time I was there, we had some heavy rains, and there would be some places where you kind of had to slosh through just a little bit. I mean, it was just not even up to my ankles.
Right.
But,
yeah, it rained part of the day when we were there, and there were a couple spots, old pavement and stuff where there was puddles and stuff you want to try to avoid.
But
I know what I was going to say. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
A lot of times hotels will hand out trash bags for people to like tie up around their feet if that happens, if the people have to get out.
Okay. And that ties into what I was going to say earlier is, listen, folks, if you're able to, stay on the island. Get a hotel, get an Airbnb on the island, because what a lot of people do is the cruise ships come in, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shelley, but the cruise ships come in during the day, and there's this mad rush of people, and or these tour groups, and the tour groups will stay on the mainland, and so they go home in the evening, and they get there kind of mid-morning. So if you're on the island in a hotel, you can get out early in the morning and have the place to yourself, or you can go out in the evening, and it's just such a better experience. Is that true, Shelley?
100%. Yeah. And it's just nice to be there on the ground rather than spend half of your precious travel time just trying to get there, because it's not easy to get into Venice proper. So,
if you're going there, do it right. Enjoy yourself. Don't worry. Go to the cafe Florian that she showed us. Get some expensive coffee. Just know ahead of time you're gonna treat yourself and just enjoy it. All right.
Yeah, so it's not that expensive everywhere in Venice, but yeah, definitely in the piazza it is.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else have anything? I'm not seeing any other questions. So Shelley, thank you very much. Folks, give Shelley a follow if you're not already. I would appreciate it as well. If you're new to me, give me a follow, and repost this, because this is recorded and other people can check it out. Bookmark it if you're got Venice in your future. And most importantly, mark your calendars to tune in for next week. I think this series just gets better and better. It's not like with the movies where the sequels go downhill. This just gets better and better, folks. So I will see you next time. And thank you, Shelley. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you.
And we will see you later. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.